But it's just a matter of patiently building up the values, and then in some cases going back and toning them down on the next pass, going back and forth with light and dark until you get a dimensional feel to it, just like drawing with pencil. Here's the neck. Lighten up the high area here.
Once you have completed the entire painting process, how do you set up your display?
As far as deciding how I'm going to mount the figure?
Yes.
Actually, as I'm painting or starting the painting process, I start thinking about that. Whether I'm going to paint both sides. In this figure's case, I decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a custom base made that has a base, but it's also going to have a piece of wood behind it. So that, and I think I'll do it in a dark wood, so that it has a nice solid background behind it, and then I'm not going to paint, the back of it. I'll probably at the end, maybe put a darker on it just to darken it up a bit, and so it'll be low key in the background. It won't catch your eye. But I want it'll be not necessarily a high pedestal, but with a wooden backdrop behind it. I have a friend that's been making some really nice bases for me that I can mount flats onto the part that's sticking up. And I was looking at this one that I have for one that I'm going to mount on the wood piece, and I thought, this figure would actually look very nice on that, and it's got a nice arch going on the top of the wood. Oftentimes when I'm painting, I'll get an idea of how to mount the figure. I usually use these wooden blocks, or as the Lincoln has a flat background, it's just on a piece of black foam core. And as I'm working, I just kind of start getting ideas of how I'm going to present it, and then usually, and then sometimes you have to modify your painting process to what you decide. Sometimes it's better to take it at a certain point, and if you're going to put it on a base, mount it on a base, and then do the finishing painting while it's on its final base. It's kind of random, I guess. Is the answer to your question? Is it's random.
This looks like a kick forward from velvet, dark velvet, cloth background.
Yes. If I am lagging in my decisions, I put them on velvet and put them in a frame. That's the last resort where I haven't decided what to do yet. That always works. Black will always, I guess that one's actually on brown. I had some brown that I wanted to try out. But black it's always a good fallback. And then I try not to mount them permanently on the velvet, so that I have to pry them off if I decide to do something else with them. But that also leads to issues when you're traveling, of it not being secure. Okay, let's go over this area again, just to show how the light will build up. I'm just literally putting kind of dots and kind of skimming over the top of the engraving, and then using a drawing process. I'm not putting as many dots in the more shadowy areas, and then making the dots denser in the real high highlight areas. Let's put a little bit of light here. His leg. Here's the knee, the top of the folds. This area in here is muddy. The darks where he's holding the reins and stuff. So just so that I can find them, I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight This may not be what the end result will be, but at least I can differentiate it. This belt-like object is getting lost, so I'm just going to highlight it a little bit here so I can find it. And this is still part of the discovery process of the figure itself. I'm still getting familiar with it. A couple weeks ago I threw some grays on here and started finding things in here that I hadn't really seen before. And that's another reason that I like to do this process, is I can, by the time I get done with the grayscale, I'm pretty familiar with what the engraver and the designer had in mind for the figure. If you just start painting on it and throwing color and you're not familiar with the figure, you'll find that you'll be painting over stuff because you'll paint something red that really should have been black. You can see things are starting to stand out a little more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to a very dark. Let's see. That's not as dark as I'd like. Let's go with this guy. I like the folk art paint, but I don't like that it's real blobby like that. Leaves chunks. I like the burnt umber color though that they got going on there. Okay, this is still pretty transparent. You can see on the palette it's still very, very thin as opposed to what's going on here. And I might even thin it out a little more. It's pretty watery. Some people get frustrated because if it's too watery, it's not going on as opaque as they would like. But you just wait 5 minutes and put another layer on. Okay, where can I show the here? In here. Let's go under here. There, you can see the difference between the light and the darks that I've just painted. Give it an impression of dimension. Let's see, let's go in here. Maybe we can pop some of these things out a little bit. I'm literally just putting dots with the tip of the brush. I got 2 hairs on the end of the brush that are doing the work here. My biggest problem is I get involved, I'm doing this, and then I realize I'm using acrylics and my brush is petrifying, so I gotta rinse it off and get some fresh paint going. Now there's texture in here on the braid, so I'm going to try to bring that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this dark in, and then I'm going to go back to the light color. And let's see if we can pop the braid out just for a demonstration. I think I'll go a little bit thicker on the paint, but a little less on the brush. The light is not real good in here, but I can still see it. And I'm just placing a dot of light paint. It's really not light enough, so I'm actually going to go almost white. Whoops, may have gone a little too far on that. I'll try to lift it. And that was a very, very quick 3D demonstration on that. I'll go back in later and fix it up. Let's put some more highlight in here.
Did you prime the piece prior to?
I did. I use Floquo Gray primer. That is my favorite primer for metal. See, I have too much on my brush. If you just take all the paint off your brush, if you work quickly, it'll work as a wick, and you can wick all that out of there. But then you got to go away and move somewhere else for a few minutes while it dries. Floquo Gray primer is the best, I think, for these metal flats. It's got a nice even flow to it. If it's not old primer, it really gives a smooth surface. And this is a number 0 Winsor Newton brush that I'm using. Okay, thank you. What I'll do is I have a photo that I took of this before I took it off my workbench. And when I get home, I'll take another photo. I'll do a side-by-side in a newsletter so you can see the difference between with what I started for the demo and what I ended up with. Okay.